Hi, my name is Janet Barrett, and I'm a professor of music education at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Today I'd like to invite you to take a journey with me across the music curriculum. Imagine a music classroom where students and teacher are exploring John Coltrane's jazz classic, Giant Steps, alongside the surprisingly sophisticated children's book by Chris Roshka, which celebrates the textures and layers of the piece, and the award-winning film by Michel Levy, also called Giant Steps. Together, students enjoy Coltrane's sheets of sound, his cascades of melodic invention, and the imaginative leap of paying tribute to a renowned musician through story, image, sound, and movement. Now, imagine a choral classroom performing Morten Lauridsen's Contre qui rose, based on the poetry of the German poet Rainer Maria Rilke. In this classroom, the choral music educator takes the time to explain Rilke's poem to the students, exploring multiple meanings of the text, and then draws from students' responses to consider multiple interpretations of Lauridsen's settings. Imagine a music composition classroom in which students encounter the fascinating artistic output of the artist Chuck Close, who creates expansive portraits by stacking small lozenges of color successively to form the overall image. They turn to a poem written by Jan Greenberg, written in a special form called Diamante. It also resembles Close's lozenges. Alongside those two works is juxtaposed Philip Glass's musical portrait of his friend Chuck Close. They were lifelong friends, also constructed with tiled musical patterns. Across the arts, students examine the artist's use of their respective materials and the affordances of their disciplines, which launches the creation of their own portraits of family, friends, and persons close to them. Imagine an orchestra rehearsal preparing to perform Mendelssohn's Overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream, a piece composed when Mendelssohn was himself only 17 years old. In glorious serendipity, the English literature classes across the hall are studying the play, while simultaneously comparing it to Neil Gaiman's graphic novel of the same name. The intersections of thematic ideas, historical and contemporary eras, distinctive modes of working across music, literature, drama, give both students and teachers a complex mix of art forms and intersections to consider. The music educators in these 4 classrooms are committed to the pedagogy, benefits, and value of an interdisciplinary approach. They reflect on key principles to guide their work, and this is probably one of the most foundational principles, that music influences and in turn is influenced by other realms of knowing. As a discipline, music is really unbounded as an expressive field of human experience. We move out of music in our lives in a dynamic and free-flowing way. In so many ways, music cannot be held still. As a school subject, though, music is often bound by time of day, by location within the school, by the expertise of the teacher, by students' expectations, and by the traditions and norms of the community and the school. The dynamic nature of music, then, can be compromised when it's confined and isolated from other forms of experience. Music teachers who are committed to an interdisciplinary approach move across boundaries in order to foster meaningful connections between music and other disciplines. In this way of thinking, you can imagine a school subject to function in the same way that a cell wall does. The cell itself retains its shape and its character, while allowing inspiration and ideas to flow across the cell wall in a permeable fashion. Music then is not sequestered or isolated. When it makes sense, the study and performance of music is enhanced by parallel, complementary connections to other subject matters. In music classes, teachers help students develop this valuable relational thinking by stressing interdisciplinary connections. That is, the myriad ways that music is connected to other musics and musicians. For example, think back to Coltrane, other pieces besides giant steps, and how one might situate his work in the entire realm of jazz and all the subgenres of jazz. Think of Mendelssohn as a part of a group of composers of the Romantic era, and how understanding style principles will enhance our performances. Think of the entire song cycle of Lauridsen's, of which Contre qui rose is but a part. How do the other settings of the Rilke poems relate to one another as a musical whole? When we explore those kinds of relationships, we're thinking in an intradisciplinary way. Within music classrooms, as well as across classrooms, students develop relational thinking when we stress interdisciplinary connections across many subject matters. Our sister arts are natural complements to this work, as are other closely related disciplines of history, cultural studies, and many more. If you're interested in pursuing an interdisciplinary approach further, here are some good starting points. Begin by gathering a repertoire of works with a high IQ. And when I say high IQ, I mean interdisciplinary quotient rather than intelligence quotient. Search for examples that pulse with possibilities for connected work. Take the time to take inventory of the connections that make sense to you first. Do your homework by steeping yourself in the work, generating your own deep rather than superficial connections. Make note, though, that no matter how many connections you make as a teacher, your students will make and form connections that you will not be able to imagine in advance. This open-endedness is one of the joys and one of the prime reasons that this approach is so important. Juxtapose closely related works by teaching them side by side. This makes it all the more likely that related ideas will pop into students' fields of attention. Lastly, consider when to teach for connections. I often keep my dear friend Claire McCoy's heuristic in mind, that interdisciplinary work makes sense when 1 + 1 is greater than 2. In other words, you know you're on the right track when, as you combine disciplines, the overall educational experience is stronger than if you had dealt with each of them separately. When you think broadly about these ideas, you'll begin to see how meaning, relational thinking, and connections are at the heart of these integrated worldviews. Accordingly, you'll find many opportunities to pursue these avenues: connections within an arts discipline, in our case music, connections between music and other related art forms, and connections from the discipline and the arts to disciplines outside the arts. Ultimately, though, the power and value of this work rests in the sense that the students form from the arts to their lived experience. As you already know as teachers, students are sense makers. An interdisciplinary perspective enriches the music curriculum by allowing many forms of experience and many responses to music to flourish and take root. I invite you to consider these possibilities.